It's time to frugal prepper, so I've just been out here doing the AC repair on the Equinox, and I've got it all done and charged up, and I thought this would be a good time to kind of go through what I use as kind of a side work mechanic, home mechanic, to diagnose and work on AC systems. So first you're going to need a vacuum pump. This is actually an old refrigerator AC or refrigerator compressor. This one is actually, it says it somewhere. Oh, you can't see it because it's behind that piece of wood, but this is a 134A compressor. Came out of a 130A refrigerator that someone had damaged by moving it. It lost all of its refrigerant. They got a new fridge. I saved the compressor. I have a video that I'll link up here as to, where I built this. It's worked very well. You just need an old AC compressor, some scrap wood, know how to wire it, and you get one of these little ends on eBay to solder on. So then I have my cheap Chinese gauge set. I'll put a link to these below. I got these on eBay. They've actually worked great. I haven't had any issues with them. They seal up tight. They work well. And then I also got an extra yellow hose and this coupler right here, which just allows me to reach my vacuum pump on the ground. I have this little can tap. You can also get the side can taps. This one worked great. It's a cheap one from China. And then I had to get an adapter because it had the wrong size fitting thing on it for my hose. I just found that out of China as well. So these are just all things I ordered on the slow book from China over time so that I have them. Some other things is I like the UV dye. You can buy this as well in the bottles, which is a great idea. If you've got the hoses apart, you can pour it in there. A lot of times what I do is just put a slight vacuum on the system, shoot some of this in there, then give it a few minutes to drain down, out of that hose down into the system, and then vacuum the system so that there's UV dye in it. It says 5 shots, but I can easily get 10 or 12 out of these. You don't need a whole lot. And then of course you got to have a UV light if you're looking for leaks, and you'll see how that makes that just shine and glow. You see up there on the lid where I got some on it, that you can probably see it on my hands too. See, I got some on my hands there. So the UV light is just a cheap little Amazon ultraviolet light. I have some of these yellow glasses. These are just from Harbor Freight. When you're looking for a leak, these will help you see it a little better. But you can a lot of times see it without that. Then I have this, again, from eBay, just a valve core kit for air conditioning systems, because a lot of times these valves leak, and I like to just replace them if I can. Now, this low pressure side valve is just one out of this kit. The high pressure on GM, you have to buy a Dorman part number. I'll put a link to it down below, but it actually unscrews off there and you replace that whole little assembly. See, I got a couple of valve core tools there, just for getting those valve cores in and out. Now, I buy my refrigerant at Rural King, just because it's $4 a can. It's the cheapest place. Then I have this too. I don't use this, right, for charging systems. What I use this for is to clip on the low pressure side. This is my other method of finding leaks. I'm sure it's all wrong. People tell me I'm ruining things, but it works for me. So I'll hook that up to my air compressor, and I will pump, 100 PSI in the system or whatever, and get it pressurized. This has got a one-way valve in it too. So once you pressurize it, you can take this out and it'll hold the pressure with that on there. And then I will take soapy water and just spray everything on the AC system down, especially the front of the compressor, which is what I ended up doing on this one. I just wasn't seeing the UV anywhere, and I wasn't finding the leak. But once I sprayed that soapy water on the front of the compressor with some air in it, I saw the small bubbles. So I took that compressor off, and I went and got one out of another Equinox in the junkyard. I took that one out the easy way. And so the Other thing that I like is I have one of these in a snap-on, but it just doesn't work very well. So I actually bought this cheap one off of Amazon, and it works much better. But these things can be a little hit and miss, but basically it just will start beeping real fast. I'll turn the sensitivity way up, all the way. It'll beep like that when it finds Freon, and then slow like this when it doesn't find any Freon. They work somewhat, but they're not always reliable on a very small leak. You just might not detect it. So that's pretty much my AC tools. The other thing you're gonna want, let me see, I got it in the garage still here, is you'll want some PAG oil. You can like pour this down in the line before you charge, or since I had the compressor off, I just turned it around a few times, got as much of the old PAG oil out as I could, and put 2.5 ounces of fresh PAG oil in, which is what all data calls for on a compressor replacement. So if you get a new compressor on these, they usually come pre-charged with oil, but you don't want to have too much oil. But if you replace something, put an ounce or so in there, and you might be able to, you know, it's not going to hurt to have a little extra. My experience. So yeah, I'm not an AC expert, but this is how I diagnose them at home. I like the idea of charging an empty system with air first. I know that puts some moisture in the system, so you just have to make sure you vac it down for a really good long time, at least an hour, to get all that moisture out of the system. Under a vacuum, the boiling point of water becomes very low, and so that will evaporate all the water out of the system. The other thing that you want, and I'll put a link to this below as well, this is a freebie, but you're going to want an R134A pressure chart. Let me take this inside, go through it where it's not windy. So when you do your high and low pressure readings, it's temperature sensitive. A lot of people are really confused about how you read the gauges or what they mean. This gives you a good general reference. So if it's 70 degrees outside, you should see your low pressure cycling around 35 to 40, and your high pressure around 145 to 160. So if you don't have a system that's completely empty, but you're trying to top it off, or you don't have the ability to measure how much you're putting in, you can kind of get it pretty darn close by knowing your ambient temperature outside and then looking at your gauges. This is why you can't really diagnose a system with those little cans that just clip on the low pressure side. So down here it kind of tells you some of the common things. If both sides are low, you probably need to add refrigerant. If you're low and high on the high pressure side, you probably have a blockage in the orifice tube or the expansion valve. If you're high and low, probably have a bad compressor. So if your low pressure is high and your high pressure side is low, and then here if it's high, it'll say system's overcharged, which is true. But the other thing I wrote down here that I've discovered is no condenser fan kicking on will cause a high reading as well. So it's important to always check that. But that's just what I've learned working on AC over time. Now what you can do, I generally can estimate, like this car holds like 21 ounces. And so by the time, you know, you can't ever get every last little bit out of these, right? There's always going to be a little left. So I'll just put in 2 cans at 24. If it's over a couple ounces, it won't hurt a thing. And there's going to be a little loss when you disconnect your hoses too. The other thing I have done when I need right in the middle of a can is you can go ahead and hook up to this can. I have a little scale with a tare weight. So you put this can on there, you hit your tare button with your hose and everything hooked up, and kind of balance your hose on a bungee cord or something, and then hit your tare weight and then start filling. And you can just control the fill with the blue knob here, right? And then you can watch that scale and you'll know when it goes down to -6, you put 6 ounces in. So that's one way to kind of get around it if you don't have a fancy machine to measure what you're putting in there. As far as evacuating systems, I have a friend who's a mechanic, and they have a recycling machine. So I just stop by that garage and they'll vacuum down for me. There's a recycler, so they're happy to get the refrigerant. They can recycle it and reuse it. So a lot of people say they have problems finding somebody that will do that. I would say if you call a shop that has a recycler where they can reuse that refrigerant rather than just recovery where they have to then send it out, they're more likely to want to do it for you. But it still takes their time, so you may need to pay them a little something. You may need to pay them 25 or 30 bucks, but it's worth it because it's probably some kind of big felony to evacuate this stuff in the atmosphere. So I always try to avoid spilling it any way I can, you know, avoid it getting in the atmosphere. There's always going to be a little loss in the connections and stuff. You can't help that, but you can minimize it. So anyway, that's kind of what I do. You know, just let me know what you think or how you do it. I don't use stop leak in my systems, and I never fill with just those single cans anymore, the little fill thing, because you know you're gonna have these gauges were like 25 bucks or something for the whole kit on eBay, and then you can buy your cans for $4 a piece. You go to AutoZone and you buy one of those cans with the little crappy built-in low pressure only gauge and all that. You're paying like 25-30 bucks for that one can sometimes. It's just not worth it. You know, just get your gauges and keep them in your toolbox and have them. All right, I'll talk to y'all later. It's Tom, your frugal prepper.